Now on the Amp'd UP211 podcast, we are thrilled to present Mr. David Powell. David Powell's inspirational journey began at birth, being born without hands and malformed legs. These were challenges that have never slowed him down. As a freshman in high school, David lost his mother to a drug overdose, leaving him devastated. A few years later, he fell into a dark hole of drug addiction and alcoholism until the age of 29. Over time, and after a move to Salina, Kansas, David once again beat the odds and overcame those struggles. He is now fulfilling one of his lifetime dreams of becoming a motivational speaker to help people through helpful messages of life and its perspectives. Please welcome David Powell. David, how are you? Good to see you today, sir.
Good, my man. How are y'all doing?
Oh, we're doing great. Welcome to the Amp'd UP211 podcast. I am super pumped to learn a little bit more about your story. I've been doing lots of research on you, which I appreciate that you put out content. I've been sort of combing through your video blog, your YouTube channel, the many things that have been written about you, news articles that have been done about you. You are definitely someone that is not hard to find, which is nice.
Right.
Yeah, it's a very good thing. And you know, someone like yourself, your limb difference is definitely extraordinary in the sense that you don't have your hands. And describe to me exactly. Right. Describe, I appreciate that. Describe to me exactly how your legs are malformed. Like what happened where, you know, you don't have full use of, you know, your legs.
So I'm glad you've kind of been looking me up a little bit to kind of see a visual of it, because
Yeah.
it's kind of hard to explain. But on my left side, I have from my hip to my thigh. I'm sorry, from my hip down to my knee.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all normal. And then from my knee down, I have just a fibula, just one bone, a fibula with a little foot on the end that has four toes. And on the right side, that's where it gets kind of confusing if you don't have a visual. But I have from the knee down without the knee attached to my hip.
Oh, interesting.
So I have a fibula that's not really, that goes, I have a little foot on the end of that one too with four toes, like a premature foot, a smaller one. Now the hip, I don't know if this is too much information, but it's not like a ball and socket. It's just a fibula that goes into, it just connects to my pelvis with cartilage and muscle.
Got it.
And growing up, I used to, before the use of prosthetics, I used to use my feet for everything: eating, dressing, writing. I could write essays with my feet. I can barely write now, but yeah, I used to do it all with my feet. But
and when I think about you and observe you on video, and I very much appreciate you making that accessible to people so we can better understand, you know, what your journey is like, what this human experience is like for someone like yourself. Right. I definitely go to that place of your life is such a huge exercise in adaptation. Because what we know, right, as people with fully formed limbs is there's one very specific way to do things. And we walk a certain way, we handle things with our hands a certain way. People are sort of hardwired into that thought of, well, this is just how you do things. Right. And then we meet someone like David and we say, okay, now hold on a second. How does he drive? How does he prepare a meal? How does he play with his kids? All of these things you discuss and you cover in a lot of your content. And again, it's this adaptation piece. And I think what was really heartwarming for me was to see just how incredibly normal your life is.
Right.
It looks a little different, right? Because we all have that picture of what things are supposed to look like, but you're doing all the same things, thriving in that space. I want to talk a little bit about your childhood, and I talk about this a lot in the podcast in the way that I am fascinated with people that I refer to as lifers, people that have just been this way their whole life.
Right.
And I came to my amputation about 7 years ago, so I spent the majority of my life, because now I'm 56, I spent the majority of my life with both legs, and then everything I had sort of this like, cataclysmic sort of shift into redefining myself. But I look at someone like you and I say, was there, a moment where that you can recall significantly, because you're different, but was there a moment in your childhood where that became most apparent? Because when we're babies and stuff, I mean, we're very nurtured and we're very cared for, but then suddenly you have to interact with the outside world. And I have to assume that those are the moments when you sort of process in your young mind, okay, something's very different about myself. I mean, what did your childhood look like?
So I'm glad we brought this up, because people ask me why I'm so positive and why I'm so independent, and it has to do a lot with how my parents raised me. I think the reason, and you mentioned earlier how I'm pretty transparent and have all the content out there, and I want people to see how normal of a life that I have, even though I don't have I'm not like them. My dad, when we went to the park when I was younger, or at somebody's house, they would look at him, oh, what happened to him? And be like, he's right there. Ask him. He's the one that has it. Ask him. And then of course I would explain what happened. So I kind of credit him on me being so open about the disability. They didn't really give me boundaries. That was another cool thing I know. And especially with some presentations that I do, I have parents come up to me that have, disabled children. Oh, should we let them do this, or should we let them do that? My mom was letting me jump off the couch. She was letting me do all kinds of stuff. And it wasn't to let me be a rambunctious kid. It was just to let me figure out what my boundaries were, to help me figure out what I can and can't do. And I think that's super important. Being disabled, it's kind of frustrating when I see other parents coddling their kids, or sheltering them, should I say. We're people too, man. Just let them live life. I know we gotta we gotta figure out life a little differently than most people, but that's a part of the journey. We got to figure out what we're capable of and what we're not capable of. And I think it's important to not let anyone tell you what you're capable of and what you're not capable of, because they don't know. Only you know what you can and can't do, and you have to figure it out.
So allowing you to be just a normal kid, doing all of the things that your instincts were telling you as a child, because kids are just going to do what they do. And sometimes parents have to step away and let them, for lack of a better phrase, let them fall down, let them make mistakes. And I always think of the times when your parents would say, don't touch the stove, it's hot. And for some reason, children still need to find that out on their own. You can tell them 50 times, don't touch that stove, it's hot. And until they touch it and go, ow, then it sort of sinks in. So creating an open space for you as a child and giving you the opportunities to discover the world on your own, and what you could do, what you couldn't do, and then maybe how to adapt to be able to do some of those things that other people were doing, but figuring it out in a way that provided you that feeling of, self-worth, pride, things that, well, hey, I can do that. I can use my crayons just like every other kid. I might do it a little bit different, but I can still do it. I have coloring books too, that sort of thing. And the physicality of it in saying, if he wants to jump, body slam off the couch or do something,
let him figure it out.
let him figure it out. And I think it's a great point about, I think you said your father was like, he's right here. Look, he can answer the question.
Right. That happens a lot in our
And
society today too. When someone's with, like, especially, I don't really experience it because I guess my personality doesn't portray me having any setbacks, but I used to work for an advocacy business back in the day where I went to doctor's appointments with other disabled individuals, and the doctor would be talking to me. I mean, that's your patient. Like, talk, and that's common too. I've heard numerous stories where the doctor talks to the caregiver versus
mm,
talking to the individual, and that
yeah.
just kind of, that's a big issue in the disability realm, is people they don't talk to the person. They want to talk to the other person that's with them. I don't
Yeah,
know.
so those disability rights sounds like that resonates for you.
Right.
You know, being regarded in in a very sort of validated way that, hey,
Right.
I'm right here. I'm sitting right here. You know, I'm a person. I'm not less than.
Right.
I'm, a full functioning person. I had read some things about Scottish Rite Hospital and how it influenced your perspective. Can you talk a little bit about that for the audience?
That was Scottish Rite Hospital is amazing, by the way. They're in Dallas, Texas. So 1996, I want to say. I was living in New Orleans with my mom, and she had some issues going on where my dad got custody of me, and I moved to Dallas. And I was in a wheelchair at that time. And if you know anything about electric wheelchairs, they don't fold up and just sit in the back seat of the car. They got batteries, and it's a big mess if you don't have a lift in your vehicle. And I was a very
Major piece of equipment.
oh yeah, and it's not cheap either.
Yeah.
So my mom had a van with the lift, and that was fine. But when I moved to Texas, my dad wasn't really. It was kind of a spur of the moment decision when that happened. So he didn't have a vehicle with the lift in it, and not just that, but I've always been a very social person, and I love going out with friends and staying the night, especially when I was a kid, staying the night at friends' houses and stuff. And not everyone had a wheelchair, capabilities of transporting a wheelchair. So and my dad knew that, and he found that hospital in Dallas. Actually, my stepmom found it, I think. And it's all free for people that are under 18. And I still get the look when I go to different prosthetists. So I don't have like stumps at the end of my leg. I have, like I told you earlier, I have actual feet. They tried to amputate those when I was a kid, but my dad was like, "No, he doesn't have any hands. You're not going to take anything else from him. Let him have what he has, and he'll
Well,
figure it out."
not to break your momentum, what was the thought behind the doctors saying, well, we should probably take his feet as well?
They thought a stump would be easier to fit for prosthetics.
So
Versus
they were
having
looking at the long game and saying he's probably gonna things will go better
right,
if we remove his feet. And you said it was your father that said no,
yeah,
don't do that.
right. He already doesn't have hands. He's already doesn't have a lot as it is. So we're gonna whatever he has, he's gonna keep because he
And did
needs
they
that.
feel that you could use your feet for certain functions? Was that the
That's what my
thought?
dad was thinking. That was the thought of my parents because I didn't have
Okay.
hands, obviously. But the doctors were just so focused on the prosthetic piece of it, and that wasn't
Mm-hmm.
really. We tried prosthetics when I was a kid, but I was in New Orleans at that time too, and they didn't have the best technology at that
Got it.
time. So,
Anyway.
yeah, and luckily, not to shift gears again, but luckily we kept them because, as I told you, I used my feet like they were my hands for the first, 10 years of my life.
Yeah.
But so we get in the Scottish Rite, and they kind of, I was the first person they've had with like feet on the end of their limbs. So it wasn't a hardcore process, but I mean, it was a little bit different than they were used to. So we got fitted, and I'm a determined person. So when I want to do something, I'm going to learn pretty quickly on how to do it. And I was up and walking after they were fitted and done. I was probably walking within in the first 2 or 3 weeks,
Wow.
but I had to build up endurance, and that was the hard part, was building up their endurance to walk long distances. But so I'd wear my legs, and then when I got my legs, and I talk a lot about this in my presentations too, about adaptability. I'm used to doing everything with my feet, and now when I wear my legs all the time, my feet are gone, like they're covered up. So that's why I got these bad boys that I
Yeah.
learned. If I didn't have these things, my nubs, man, I don't know where I'd be. But I remember, so when I started going to school, I was in 4th grade, and having my legs on. I'm all right. We got to figure this out. You have your legs now. We gotta do something. So I remember just sitting in a regular desk. I had a lower desk that I pulled up in my wheelchair with. So I remember sitting in a regular desk, having a pen and paper on the table, and I was like, all right, well, I got to figure out how to write. And I can't remember like what all I tried. I remember what worked. So I picked the pen up with my lips, put it between. If you've seen videos, I put the pen between my
Yep.
face and my nub, and right like that. And I ended up being able to write essays with my
Wow.
arms. I learned how to eat with my arms. I learned how to, I drive with my arms. I throw a football, with the kids, baseball and football with my arms. I'm right nubbed, by the way. I'm not amsterdamdius, however you want to call it. I'm straight right nubbed, just like
I'm not
people are
going to
right.
try to I'm not going to try to create that word for you.
I tried.
It's
But
very
yeah,
well.
right. But yeah, man, I don't know what I'd do without my arms. So I've
Yeah.
gone with using my feet for my hands. And I'm glad that was all done at a young age. That way I didn't go 15, 20 years on doing it one way and then have to relearn. I only did it a few years and then just relearned how to do everything with my arms. So, but circling back to my parents, I'm very fortunate to have the parents that I did that didn't feel sorry for me, and they pushed me to
Yeah.
do what I had to do.
Yeah,
And my
and
stepmom especially as well. She had a lot to do with my upbringing as well. My especially with the endurance game I was telling you about with the legs. My dad and my mom, I wouldn't say they felt sorry for me, but they were like, "Oh no, he's tired. Oh, it hurts him a little bit." But my stepmom was on the other end. No, he's got this. He's gonna get. I remember being so mad at her a few times too. But if it wasn't for her, man, I wouldn't say I wouldn't be walking, but I wouldn't be walking as fast as I would. She pushed me a lot, and I'm very grateful for the way she maneuvered things. It was a couple things she pushed me with growing up that I didn't understand at the time. Another example was doing laundry. I can't reach in with my hands, obviously, to do laundry. And now I do it with my feet. I just jump up on the dryer, pull stuff without my feet, throw it in the dryer. But back then, they didn't want their kids hopping on washers and dryers.
mm,
So I had a broomstick. And I know it sounds horrible, but it made me figure out on how to do things. But I had a broomstick and just fished everything out. Took me a while at first. Even like socks were a pain to get. But
they're
that's how I
they're a pain to get for us who have hands,
yeah,
let alone without,
right.
So I get it.
I just bring
You
that up
know,
because I'm very fortunate that I had a stepmom that I did because she pushed me and influenced me a lot in my
yeah,
upbringing.
I mean, you talk about your parents, and it's beautiful to hear you speak in a way of your support system. And so often, people in our community, people with limb differences and amputations and things like that, support systems seem to be the most critical part of how we create forward movement in our lives and feel validated.
Especially when
And
you're disabled, because everyone feels sorry for you and they want to do everything for you. But the
yeah,
support system is who pushes you to figure it on your own.
yeah, I would agree with that sentiment. The whole it's not about someone feeling sorry for you. It's about someone giving you the right forms of support that give you the ability to create that progress and help you reach your personal goals just
Right.
as a person, whatever that looks like. But you've been very transparent about, your parents, your mom, the loss of your mother,
That was huge.
and that is a part of your story that I found really captivating. And I can only assume that it's never a comfortable topic, but it's something that
Right.
you're willing to
Oh yeah,
explore
definitely.
because I look at you and I say, okay, here's this courageous, kid that has been born with this pretty dramatic limb difference, and he loses his mom. How old were you when that
14.
happened?
14. I was a freshman in high
14.
school.
Wow.
Yeah, and I tell people too, and that's another thing I talk a lot about in my presentations too. I do have limb differences, obviously, And I've also went through an addiction phase in my life, but losing my mom was by far the hardest thing I've ever had to deal with personally. Um,
And this was
and,
after your parents were no longer together?
and this is
Okay.
he passed away on this on the same boundaries as why I moved to Texas. My mom and dad both met in recovery. They were both drug addicts and alcoholics, and they
Okay.
met in Kansas, where I eventually went to get clean at. And my dad ended up kind of catching on to staying clean and living a productive life, where my mom kind of got stuck in that life. She'd have spurts here and there where she'd go to rehab, and that's kind of what happened when I moved to Texas. Is I was supposed to fly home. I went to Dallas for Mardi Gras because there's a holiday in New Orleans for a week. And when I was supposed to go home, my dad got a call from his attorney. Actually, still don't know how he got wind of it, but my mom ended up in rehab. She passed out in a restaurant on pills the night before I was supposed to come home, and
Mm.
wound up in a detox and treatment center where there was no one to pick me up from the airport. And this is just one of many examples that my dad had to deal with. And that was one of the reasons why they divorced. And that was one topic we talked about it as, and I was a huge mama's boy. That's why he didn't want to take me away from her. But there was numerous conversations we had growing up where, hey, do you want to come live with me? Or how would you feel about that? I kept on turning them down. But eventually he had to be an adult and not just listen to his child's wants and make the best decision for him, for his
Yeah.
child. So that's when he took me to a park one day after my daycare and he's like, hey, you're staying with me now. And that was pretty rough too, moving to Texas. It was an awesome thing, as time went on, but it was just a very, as a 9-year-old, that was pretty tough, moving from your home just all of a sudden. And I was the only child too, and my stepmom had 3 kids of her own, so I had to learn how to share. I had to learn how to have brothers and sisters, and that wasn't um, as easy as it sounds. But
So you moved in with your father,
right,
your stepmom, her children, and then your mom was sort of left to her own devices,
yeah,
so to speak?
She ended up moving to Texas to be closer to me because it was 9 or 10 hour drive from New Orleans to Dallas, and then she moved
Yeah.
to Wichita Falls, where she had a couple friends at, and she kept trying to get sober, going to AA meetings and rehab, just never got it. But I would go to see her every other weekend and on the holidays and a few months in the summer. And going back to when she actually passed, she went to go visit a cousin in Arizona who's also a drug addict. She started when the internet became a big thing. She was dancing for guys on the internet. Her cousin was, and ended up moving in with my mom. And then she met this guy online, the cousin who was rich supposedly, flew to Arizona, bought her an RV, and Benan was her name. And she was like, "Hey, Susan." Susan was my mom, and she was like, "Hey, we'll fly you down here. I need you to drive my car back behind this RV." And they were going to pay her some money for it to help her out because she was struggling. And I wasn't there obviously, so I don't know exactly what went down. They said there was no foul play. It was just an overdose on one of her medications she was on, with mixture of alcohol. And she called me from the airport. It was the day before she died, saying she was leaving. And that next day, or no, hold up, it was a week before I was supposed to go see her. So she called me from the airport that Friday before, not so I went to go visit her on a Friday, but the weekend before is when she called, and so when she went. And I don't know what, like I said, what transpired, but the Friday came along where I was supposed to go to her house and I still haven't heard from her. And I just remember some weird feeling in my stomach the whole day. I just knew something was off.
Yeah.
And then when I got off the bus, I rode the bus, and I was halfway home and I saw my dad and stepmom pulling up in the car. And when they let me in, my stepmom got in the back seat with me, and that's when I knew something happened. That's when I lost it. I was like, "What's wrong? What happened?" And that's when she let me know. She passed away. And I can't describe that feeling, man. That's like I guess some people can relate. That's lost like a wife or a husband or a mom or dad, but it's like an indescribable. You feel all kinds of emotions at one time, and it's kind of
Yeah.
suffocating. But
And that was how long ago now? You were 14 then. So how many years ago was
23
that?
23 years,
23 years. And
2001. Yeah, so 20. Yep, crazy.
when you visit, those emotions, because those things when we lose someone close to us, that doesn't go away. I believe that we learn how to cope. We learn how to process some of that information. Whenever there's has ever been trauma or some kind of struggle in my life, I feel like I go through various phases of healing, because usually when things first happen to me, it's sort of that numb kind of, okay, this
Right.
happened. It's kind of shocking. But then I will find years later, when I revisit those feelings or what had happened to me, I tend to go to a pretty emotional place. Like, I've almost given myself permission at that point to now really feel all the things that maybe I couldn't when
Right.
it was happening in real time. So as, an adult who now has children and a family to raise and all of those things, you know, what about your perspective as a father, sort of approaches those emotions about losing your mom?
Well, of course, yeah. There, especially when I had my first. Well, like I told you, I have one biological, then the other three they're step. Um, but I remember when I had when I had the biological, when I had my first kid, that was something that anybody wants their mom to be a part of. And that was also something that we kind of talked about as I was growing up. She wanted grandkids. You knew she was curious too on how I was going to handle things, because she asked some kind of personal weird questions just growing up, like, how are you going to do this with the girl, or this, that, or the other. So I know she was curious, and I know it would have made her heart melt when she knew I got, the relation. Well, I won't say all the relationships I've been in, but when I got my first girlfriend, or when I had my first kiss, or when I had a kid, or even when I graduated high school, to shift gears, not even, girl or parent wise, but even graduating high school. Um, there's a lot of things that I envisioned my mom being there for that I don't
Yeah,
get
just
emotional about.
watching you become a man.
Right. And just thinking now that I have kids, those are things I can't wait for, because I'm going to definitely be a part of that. And it's, as you said, it's watching your kids grow up.
Yeah.
And especially, I don't have any, luckily my kids don't have any disabilities. But the way I see it, if you have someone who, doesn't have arms, or, is different than other people, you're going to have questions, just like the doctors did when I was born. Or is he going to have a productive life? Is he going to have a career? Is he going to have kids? And so being able to watch that happen would kind of solidify it for me and give me kind of a peace. And, I know she's up there watching. She watched from afar, but it would have made me feel really good for her, knowing that she's watching me do it, to make her feel better,
Yeah.
knowing that I'm living a life that, she'd want me to live.
Yeah, wanting to share those accomplishments, those triumphs, those beautiful moments, with your mom, and her seeing you thriving with your family and all the other endeavors that you're pursuing in public speaking and otherwise, I would think would be a huge affirmation that she had done a good job. She laid the foundation for your life, and you built on that foundation that she created for you. Do you feel like the loss of your mom played a role in you falling into addiction
Oh,
yourself?
100%.
Yeah,
And I kind of learned that. I didn't really realize it at the time, but when I went through rehab and working the 12 steps to doing AA and all that, that's where I kind of figured out that that's where it started. Or how do I want to phrase it? It had a lot to do with it, should I say, because I was already in high school at the time. I think I was a freshman. So I probably drank a handful of times on the weekends, like at friends' houses or something like that. Nothing crazy though. But then I remember starting the sophomore year, and I love football, and I can't play football obviously. So I was a manager for the team. So I traveled. That was my friends. The football players are my friends, and they
that's
party.
great.
So sophomore year, man, that's when the drinking really started started taking its toll. And my dad, like I told you, growing up being out, or him going through alcoholism and addiction, he wanted me to stay away from parties and stay away from those types of things. But that didn't mean I did. I did a lot of lying in high school and a lot of, things I probably shouldn't have. But it was mainly just drinking and smoking a little pot in high school. And when I moved out my parents' house, because they were pretty strict on me in that category because of their past. But that's what I wanted to do. So I moved out when I was 17. And that's when the partying really began. I'm not going to go into details on all the drugs that were out there, but I tried everything under the sun. But when I took my first Lortab, that was a game changer. And my dad was I guess the apples don't fall far from the tree, because my dad was a heroin addict. And of course, hydrocodone is an opiate, same thing that he did. And I fell in love with it, man. That feeling that I had, I don't never forgot. It was a 7.5 milligram hydrocodone, and the warm fuzzies you get from it. I loved it. And that's where stuff really took off with the addiction part of it. I got an apartment with a few friends after high school, went to college, to a junior college. What the plan was, not to shift gears a whole lot here, but I'm a huge LSU fan. And so what the goal was, I had a little bitty scholarship, nothing big, like nothing to support LSU, but it supported a junior college in New Orleans for a year. Or no, actually, we thought it was for a year, but we found out it was only for a semester. And I was going to transfer to LSU eventually, is what the goal was. But when we found out the scholarship didn't cover more than a semester, my parents couldn't afford the tuition. So I moved back to Texas. I went to a junior college there, because out of state versus in-state tuition is a big difference. And I moved back in with my folks for just a couple weeks, got an apartment with a few friends I went to high school with. And I didn't last in college for long, we'll put it that way. Maybe for the first year, I was doing pretty well before I stopped going to class. I was partying every night. Stopped going to class. This was before online class was a thing, so you had to physically go to class. And,
yeah, I remember those days. You had to show up.
Yeah. And in high school, man, I never had to study. I made pretty decent grades, but I never really studied. It was just kind of came natural to me. But in college, it's not like high school. You have to study or you're not going to, or at least that's how I was. I couldn't make it without having to study.
Yeah.
And I wasn't used to that routine. And I thought, drinking and drugging were more fun than school. So ended up ditching school. I worked at a call center. That was my, can't stand them now because I worked for one a couple years ago. I'm burnt out of call centers. But I maintained, paid rent, did everything I was supposed to do. But eventually, as addiction, it starts off one way, but it gets way worse as time goes on. And before I knew it, a few years later, so my dad was a heroin addict. My mom was a pill popper, but she wasn't really, she was more Xanax than anything. But she'd go to doctors and put on her little charm, and she was a good looking lady, and she'd get anything she wanted from doctors. And that's what I ended up doing. I told doctors something hurt on me. Remember that ball and socket I told you in my right leg that I don't have?
Oh.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a
So
ball and socket.
were you using your disability as a function of getting prescriptions written and things
And
like that?
this was before tracking, prescription tracking and doctor tracking were a thing. So I'd go to multiple doctors a month saying my hip is killing me because it doesn't have a ball and a socket. So the doctors aren't familiar with that, because I had to find something that doctors weren't familiar with. So they couldn't tell me, oh, that's probably not a big thing. But they couldn't tell me it didn't hurt because they had no idea. And so I remember one doctor, I would tell him what I wanted and he would just write it out. And I'd have multiple doctors doing that a month, but it eventually became not enough, as crazy as that sounds.
Yeah.
And I also had a thing where, because pills are pretty expensive on the street. So I had a thing in my mind and never worked out. Time and time I tried. I was like, okay, well, I'm going to sell half of them. So I can have a good grip of money to go shopping or do whatever I want to, have the bills paid and have some extra money to do whatever I wanted. But 9 times out of 10, I'd use all those profits that I made to buy them back from the people that I sold them to because it ended up
Mm.
running out of the personal supply that I had. It was addiction's a nasty circle, man.
I
I
mean,
think you,
David, when you think about it, the loss of your mother set off a chain reaction that most people would probably say could have led to the end of you.
yes, yeah,
It could have led to not only succumbing to your own addiction and having a similar fate to what your mother went through,
right,
or it could have ended you in the sense of, I mean, you were a drug dealer.
jail,
So you could have went away. I mean, you
right,
could have been in all kinds of, legal and criminal and all kinds of trouble. And I speak to, many people in this community that fall into the trappings of addiction as a result of, some form of pain and trauma that they're going through related to their physical condition, right?
right,
Whereas it seems like, your wick got lit by your mom.
right,
And from there, you ended up with a certain, let's call it kind of a wildfire, where it just, addiction has this ability to sort of reach all these different parts of your life. Whether you want it to or not, it tends to sort of grow
right,
and get legs, and suddenly it's touching your professional life, and then it's touching your personal life, and then it's touching, your well-being physically and emotionally, and and now you're doing things that are completely compromising to your well-being as a person, where you're taking like major risks just to be able to survive, pay the bills, feed your addictions, things like that. So when I think about, your ground zero, let's call it, I mean, you were in the basement. I mean, you were
I was in
you
a
were
I was in a $30 a night hotel room
yeah,
with who knows who's around me, relying on a dollar cheeseburger meal or not even a meal, just a dollar cheeseburger for the day. That was my ground zero. I was panhandling. I know this is horrible to say, but just to throw it, I'm really transparent, as you know.
which I
I had,
appreciate.
well, I think that's the right way to do it. If somebody's going to tell somebody about something, might as well tell the whole thing. Um, I had a church shirt, a shirt with a cross on it. And then I had a pair of khaki shorts that had a few holes on them where it looked ruggedy, or whatever the word you want to use. And I'd put my legs on, of course. I'd go to Quick Trips. I don't know if they have Quick Trips where you're at, but it's a gas station, real popular gas station.
Yeah, we have a few.
And I would just literally go stand, not in front of the door, obviously, but kind of to the side a little bit. Wouldn't even have a sign or anything, but people would just come drop money in my pocket. And I would make hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And all that money went to, like I said, my hotel in the room was only $30 a night. I only ate a dollar cheeseburger from somewhere a day. And all of it went to make sure I had enough, whatever I was doing, whether it was heroin and pain pills. I'd make sure I have enough for the day, the night, a little bit for the next morning, so I wouldn't wake up sick. Just to go do the same thing over and over again, man. It was, looking back, it's insanity, man.
Well, it's extraordinary to look at you now, to doing my research for this particular episode of the podcast, and realizing that here is someone that is thriving. Here is someone that is raising a family and living his life with such grace and purpose. And to me, you are, in this moment, you're very much the picture of courage and strength. So you bottom out, mom's gone, things are really messed up. What would you describe as the turning point?
I'm going to answer that two ways. The turning point I thought should have been the turning point is I ended up overdosing in 2014, and I wasn't breathing for 7 minutes. I think my heart stopped for a moment. They had to resuscitate me and bring me back. um, I ended up being in a coma for a week, and I didn't have brain damage in the fact that I forgot people, places, or things. I just forgot how to I forgot how to physically do everything. I couldn't even work my cell phone. I didn't know how to unlock it. I didn't know how I held my phone. I use my nose when I'm on the fly. Just have
Mm.
my phone on my arm and use my nose. I couldn't unlock. I couldn't get dressed. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I forgot how to do everything. And you would think that would be the turning point, but it wasn't. Right when I got at the hospital, I was right back where I was. But the turning point for me, so after that happened, I was still in Kansas. I ended up coming back home to Dallas, thinking I need to be around family and friends for support for, just having the overdose and trying to get back on my feet. When I just wound right back up on old playgrounds with old friends. And that lasted for about 6 months, doing the same old stuff. But I can't explain it more than God talked to me, man. Like that it was like an epiphany. I was on the couch at a friend's house. I was couch surfing. I had woke up. I think I was withdrawn a little bit because I didn't have anything. But I just remember thinking, I was 29 at the time. I was like, man, you're 29 years old. You don't have a family. You don't have a career. Like, your time's running out, man. You don't want to be 40, 50 years old just figuring out what you want to do with your life. And I got in touch with some people back in Kansas, went back to the halfway house that I originally stayed at the time before. This time I wanted to do it. I wasn't in a position where, I know we didn't go into this earlier, but I wasn't forced somewhere this time. It was out of me wanting to do it. And that's very important with addicts. Is there's family that try and push them to get clean, push them into rehab or push them into counseling or whatnot. But
Yeah, you
nothing's
got to
going to
want it.
change until that person really wants it. And
Yeah.
I wanted it that time. And so I got back to Kansas. I remember when I got to Kansas, I knew a person that had some pills. I had one last raw. And then the next day I went into that halfway house and never looked back. That was November 5th of 2015. So November 4th of 2015 was the last time I took any kind of hard drug.
Yeah.
Um,
Your life changed on my birthday, November 5th.
oh no, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah, that is crazy.
Yeah.
I want to sort of circle back to something you just said about you can only be the one to make that decision. So often people want to believe that, it's like every other cliche, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink, stuff like that. But it really is truth,
Yeah.
because so much of our journey in our community, when you're looking at amputees, people with limb differences, to make a change for the better, no matter what that is, whether that's, pulling yourself out of addiction, whether that is wearing your prosthesis, whether that is going to physical therapy, whether that is educating, empowering, doing something to build your story, let's call it, it's up to you.
Exactly. No one
It's
else
up
going to
to
do it.
you. No, nobody can do it for you. You can surround yourself with a team of practitioners and doctors and therapists and counselors and all these talented, really, really smart people. Because I've been there. I've been there myself, where I'm just like, wow, everyone is here for me, right? Nobody gets anything done out of guilt. No one gets anything done out of feeling that they owe those people to do well.
Right.
It's a conscious decision that we all make and say, I'm going to do this. All of that other stuff is over. And today is my day one. And now I'm going to change, for the better. And obviously that served you well and propelled you to where you are today. I want to use that as a segue to talk about your public speaking. What a fantastic endeavor to offer yourself in that regard, to go out into the world, churches, schools, businesses, and talk to people, share your story, give them
hope.
a little piece of your energy, right?
Right.
Give them a little piece of David and what you've been through, and offer that hope that whatever the struggle is, that the struggle is real and things will get better. So when do you feel like that became, hey, I think I want to do that. I think I want to put myself out there.
That's been, and I won't say my mom, I guess she put it in my head a little bit, but as I got older, it's just something I wanted to do. So growing up, I wanted to either be, my mom wanted me to be something. She wanted me to go around, you know, exposing my story to helping other people. Um, and then on the flip side of that, I wanted to be, like I told you before, I'm a huge sports fanatic, football specifically. And I wanted to be like an ESPN anchor or some kind of sports broadcaster or something like that. And with the drug thing happening, and I never went to school, I really got involved with broadcasting at all. But when I got out of rehab, the time that because I went to rehab 2 other times before that, but the third time when everything panned out, when I got clean, that's when I was able to put action into putting the effort into building whatever career that it was that I wanted to do. And you don't have to have a college degree. I know it's preferred for some people, but you don't have to have a college degree to speak. So in Kansas, she wouldn't really, so I worked at Walmart, to shift gears a tad. I was, like I told you, I was burnt out of call center, so I worked at Walmart as a door greeter. Um, Huge networking opportunity, man, because everybody and their mom goes to Walmart, and I talk to people.
I'm one of them.
Me too. And so I met this teacher who knew this person named Kevin Honeycutt. He's a international keynote speaker. He's not disabled or anything to that extent, but he's a past teacher that he speaks all over the world. And she's like, let me get you with him. Let me get you a meeting with him and see if there's anything he can help you out with. And so he ended up being in the part of Kansas I was in at one time. We went out to lunch, and that's when he was just telling me how website's important, kind of just telling me little things here and there on what I should do. That's when I guess my mind shifted into, okay, this is what I'm doing, so let's figure it out. So I started building presentations. I did a lot of social media. That's where I got a lot of business in Kansas. Was social, actually, that's where most of my business came from, was social media, and it just took off. I did one, did good. They left a review. I got another one. Salina, Kansas. That took, when I first started speaking in 2016. It took off big time, and then it kind of went stale after about a year and a half. It's a small town, and we thought maybe moving to a bigger city would help. And so we moved in 2019, 2020, we moved to Greeley, Colorado, which is about an hour north of Denver. And I found out that didn't really help much. I was kind of in the same predicament. And that's when I started making flyers and was just handing them out to churches. So I got a few from doing that. Most of them come from social media. I've taken a few classes since then where I rely on emails and stuff now. But yeah, man, I love helping people. And what better way to help people? I speak to audiences. I probably spoke to maybe 400 or 500 people is my biggest audience. And I know I'm not going to help. And this is just one example, but I'm not going to be able to help every single person in that room. Not every single person in that room is going to be interested. Not every single person in that room is going to be paying attention. But
That's not really what it's about, is it?
if I can help that one person.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I feel the same way. That's where I was going, was I always say, if we can get one person up and moving, or get one person, in a new, fresh, kind of positive headspace about their situation, about their amputation or about their limb difference, or give them something to feel a sense of validation, just one person, then it's worth it. Right. It's completely worth it. And I think that is just that whole power of one kind of attitude where, I certainly have delusions of grandeur about reaching, millions and millions of people and sharing these stories with huge, audiences. But at the same time, your story is going to resonate with people.
Right.
And if it resonates with 100,000 people, great. If it resonates with 100 people, great. To me, it's all good work. And I think the fact that you were so offering of yourself, boots on the ground kind of campaign, saying, okay, I'm just going to pass out flyers and I'm going to see if someone will have me come and speak, with their congregation. Why don't you tell me about this little person that's next to you at the moment?
Oh,
Oh,
you got busted.
oh, now we made him go away.
He's looking at me. Oh man, he's pretty. So that's Emmett. He's 5.
Emmett is 5.
Yeah, but I'm gonna shift gears a little bit too. Speaking of Emmett, and it's not really just Emmett because my other kids, the step kids, there it's Aiden, Logan, and Brooke. Aiden and Logan. So Aiden was like 1 because they're only 10 months apart. They have the same dad, and Logan was like 2 months old. And before I met my wife, that was something in the back of my mind because sometimes I doubt myself. I know I talk about all this stuff, but I'm guilty sometimes too, for doubting myself or not thinking I can do something.
Sure.
But I remember thinking about when I do have kids, kind of how you were saying at the very beginning, how I'm not going to be able to pick my kids up and throw them in the air or play with them the typical way, my air quotes, my typical
Yeah.
way of how you play with a kid or even make a bottle for that matter.
Sure.
But one thing I found within myself, if I want something, I'm going to figure out a way. But I still doubt myself sometimes, even to this day, with new things, especially. But washed my feet, made a bottle, put the baby powder or the formula in a bottle, put the bottle up on a sink, put the water in, shook it up, fed them, changing diapers with my feet. I can probably do that with my eyes closed now. So there was a certain way that I picked them up with my kind of similar to how I write. I'll turn them on the side and kind of pick them up with my arm and my side of my face and throw them over my shoulder. And as they get older, they kind of form to me too. Like when I get down, that's how they know I'm picking them up. When I put my head down and they wrap their arms around me, around the back of my neck, and I just pick them up. Of course, I don't know if you've seen some TikToks with me and Emmett on the bed wrestling.
Sure.
There's just certain things that I doubted myself on that a lot of other people would probably doubt me or doubt, not just me, but other people with limb differences, how they're going to do this or do that. But you just figure it out, man. Just like I can play with my kids just like anybody else. I can change diapers. I can make bottles. I can play with action figures with
Yeah.
them. I can do anything any other dad can do. But it's just one of those things where you have in your mind based on other people how you do something. But then if you're not like other people, you can't just go with what other people do. You have to really sit back and figure out how you're going to do this because it's kind of rare you see someone like me, so you can't just go Google someone with my exact circumstances on how to do this. Because people, if they don't know how to do something, go to Google, they'll figure it out easy. But I don't know. And that's one thing I pat myself on the back for is I am pretty adaptable. I can figure stuff out.
Absolutely. There's Emmett. I see him.
Say, what's up, man? You don't got to hide. He's been seeing you the whole time. I don't know why you think just now that he sees you.
Yeah, no, the adaptation piece is very compelling with your story, and the fact that you have gone so far beyond probably the expectations of a lot of people that knew you. Let's say when you were a child, to say, okay, it's going to be a struggle in school, or it's going to be a struggle in relationships, or it's going to be a struggle with career, things like that. Your struggles are not any different than people that have all their limbs. We all have similar struggles, and that's just part of what makes us human and makes this life experience interesting and challenging. And I always feel like no matter what's going on, as long as I feel engaged and there are things that have me curious or have me thinking or problem solving, then my life is good. And sometimes that can look very dark. Like, hey, we're going through a rough period right now.
Right.
And I will look back on some of those darkest moments in my life very fondly. I'll say, yeah, that was a tough time and I worked through it. And it's something that I revere as, a character builder or a big part of who I am today. So, your particular story is definitely proof of that struggle and coming back from something that was very difficult. You can now look back fondly and say, and again, I appreciate your transparency when you say like, yeah, it was pretty messed up. It was pretty bad. And now that your lenses are clear and you can see it for what it was, it's not necessarily who you are, but it is something that shaped who you are because you've gotten beyond that. You've conquered that particular mountain. And now you're on to other things, which is very, very inspirational. I know your story is going to uplift a lot of people. I'm really excited to bring this to the audience and let them get to know you. Where is the best place to reach out to you specifically when we're talking about speaking engagements or just any kind of advocacy work that you might consider engaging if someone wants to network with you?
So I would direct them to my website. And I say this right now, especially, I've had the same website for a few years now, and I don't like it anymore. It's very redundant to me. So it is in the process of getting redone, but it's davidpowellspeaking.com. And at the very bottom, you'll see all my social media links. You'll see a button around the middle of the page that says let's chat. And then I'll go straight to my email. So I'll just hit the let's chat button and that goes straight to my email box. And I'm pretty good about getting back with people in a timely manner. So
that's perfect.
Heck yeah.
That's perfect. I appreciate you making yourself available today.
Thank you all for having me.
It's our pleasure. And I'll certainly be following along and wishing you well. Please don't be a stranger. I want to say thank you to our very special guest, Emmett. Emmett is going to be a superstar. He's a budding superstar. He's a little shy sometimes, but he's got it down. He knows how to get in the camera frame. I will give him that.
It's kind of funny too. His grandma, his nickname is Hollywood, so we'll see if that out because he loves making videos on TikTok and that kind of stuff and being calls. He loves being in the background.
We'll make sure to credit Emmett. When we write up the narrative on the episode that we have a special guest.
He just ran up.
Isn't that funny? Like kids will just sort of linger, and then once you notice them, you're right, and then they just want to disappear. They're like, oh, I got to get out of here.
Crazy shimmy.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, David. I wish you well. That's going to wrap it up for us today. My name's Rick Bontkowski. This is the AMP'd UP211 podcast, and I want to wish everyone health and happiness. We'll see you next time.